Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It is Dan, and wow, do I have a show for you guys today. So, one of the things that I often hear from guys is they'll reach out to me and ask me questions about relationships. And honestly, I have no effing clue what I'm talking about when it comes to them. I do my best, I try and help them, but they'll come to me with specific questions like, this is happening in my relationship, what should I do? And again, I just don't feel comfortable answering that. So I said, you know what? I've got to address this. So I put together a bunch of questions that the guys had asked me, and I reached out to someone that I have been following on TikTok for quite a while now, and she makes some amazing videos and is as blunt as I am, and I say that with all love and respect. And I wanted to have her on to come on and talk about these issues and some other things, and really kind of delve into how we can help men have better relationships and maybe overcome some of these issues. So let me bring her on. Her name is Natalie Wanner. Am I saying that right? Wanner?
Yep.
Yeah, all right.
Water. Close enough.
And Natalie, you go by, is it Open End Marriage on
Open
TikTok?
and married.
Hey, I got it right. All right. On TikTok, and you have some other channels, and we'll share all those later on. But
Okay.
we're gonna have a lot of fun today. I've been looking forward to this because, as I said in the opening, I have no freaking clue what I'm talking about with this stuff. So having what I consider an expert on to talk about this stuff, and you've written a book as well, and we'll get into that. Can't say how much I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about these things. And just kind of preface it for those out there. Neither I or Natalie is a mental health professional. So what we're just talking about is our experiences and giving advice from our perspective. It shouldn't be considered to be mental health advice or any of that. It's just you doing you. So, Natalie, having said all that and covered our asses, because we need to do that, right? Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and anything else you want to share?
Okay. Well, I worked in the community for over a decade. I was a contract parole officer within the community. I worked with high risk federal offenders, male. I facilitated anger management within the community to mandated clients, and that highly focused on communication,
Mm-hmm.
which made me love it even more. It became my passion. Facilitating anger management and showing people proper communication became a passion of mine. And I love that. And I did that for over a decade. Um, then we started another family, and I wrote a book on opening my marriage and living a part time single life. And I'm writing my second book
Ooh, okay.
called The Marriage Philosopher. And it's it focuses a lot on the individuals within a marriage and why it's still important to maintain some independence.
You know,
Um,
one of the things is right along those lines, right? That attracted me to your channel, and I've followed you for a while. Is exactly what you just talked about, right? Is the inner dynamics within the relationship, but making sure that both parties understand it's two way, and that
mhm.
communication and those dynamics between them is so key. And I love that you're writing a book about that because my opinion, for what little it's worth, is that's the biggest problem in most marriages and relationships in general, including non-romantic relationships, even between friends and coworkers. So I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you. It's been great. I've met so many people on my journeys. I've probably spoken to more than 50,000 people at this point. Just whether downtown New York, in airports, they flood all my social media, everything. So this is something where I've developed this love of just helping people within their relationships, by being able to communicate appropriately and effectively with one another, even if it's been 40 years.
And I think that is it fair to say that's been your primary goal with you're on TikTok. I know you're on other social medias. I'm just keep
Yeah.
referring it to you. Has that was that your primary goal for starting it? Because I've been following you ballpark about a year, give or take, and you get into some pretty tough subjects, and we'll get into some of them during the show. But one of the things that I think I applaud you again for is your brutal honesty about it, right? And much like myself, my famous saying is, "I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear." And I think you fall into that too. And I guess, is that what triggered you to do this? You said you had some changes in your marriage and a few years back. Is How did that all come about that you created this channel and are running with it?
Well, I started a coaching business for relationships just to help people get back on track. And a lot of that is just bringing them back to the table and being like, hey, like, cut the garbage.
Hmm.
And these are the actual issues. Like, you're getting lost in nothing just to avoid talking.
Hmm.
You're just getting lost in it all. And it just doesn't actually make sense to do it like that. So you either have to decide you're in the marriage or you're not in the marriage. And like, when I, like, for me, it's like, I'm honest, but I really believe that you have to have tact with that, because if you want to be heard, you have to be somebody worth listening to.
Fair point,
So
right?
yeah, so you know, I started to coach and counsel couples, just through, minor conflicts and things like that. And then as bigger issues came up, like, hey, we've been married for 25 years and sex stopped 20 years ago. It's like, okay, now we have to really decide where we want to be in life, what our future is going to look like, things like that. And the more I talk to people, the more I see them struggling. And it's like everything that they were struggling with was just like a puzzle to me. It was like, oh, just do this, this, and this.
Hmm.
Oh, you could do this, this, and this. And it's like, if you're stuck in somebody else's formula of what a marriage should look like or be like or function like, when you actually have never seen the inner workings of it, you're
Well,
probably going to get a standard marriage that struggles and just basically looks put together, but is nothing behind the curtain. There's nothing.
that's a fascinating point that you just made that kind of hit home with me. If let's explore that a little, okay? So one of the things that I had growing up was my parents split when I was about 9 months old.
It,
So I never saw them together. I never grew up in a married household, so to speak. My mother then, a few years later, did remarry. I had my stepsister with him, and that was not the most healthy of marriages. I'm trying to be polite with it. And so I never had that blueprint, if you will, on what a marriage is supposed to look like. So I kind of made my own,
yeah,
right? And so then I get into my first marriage, young, naive idiot of 23. And, as I look back at it now, and this is where I'm kind of reflecting on what you just said, I didn't have any blueprint to look at. So to me, what I thought was normal, what should go on in a relationship, I would say some of it was from Hollywood type stuff, right? What you saw on TV, but I had no idea what I was doing, and I think probably most young people don't, to be honest. But I think more so than anyone else, I would say I didn't, and I think that's even being exacerbated now, even more so. Divorce is far more prevalent. There's far more single mother households than there were even 20 years ago, let alone 50. What's your thoughts on all that? I say marriage, and I'll just cut it to relationships as a whole are in trouble right now. And do you
yeah.
think some of it is that we don't have that blueprint out there?
I think people take the traditional blueprint and think, if I find my soulmate, it's going to be effortless. And that's
Ah,
lunacy to me, because all bonds are breakable. It doesn't matter who they're with, all bonds are breakable. No relationship is self sufficient. It's not enough to just be like, I found somebody I really love and love is going to carry me through. I assure you, it will not. It might carry you till the death do us part out of stubbornness, but that's pretty much going to be the only vow you're going to fill.
that's interesting because I agree with you 100% on that, right? And that was me. If I just do certain things, yeah, it may not be perfect, but I love her. We're, soulmates. That was the stuff that was going through my mind. Little did I know, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think, to your point, I think that's even more the case now. My opinion. And again, I'm going by what I hear from guys, right? Because I hear from guys
Yeah.
every single day about this stuff, and I can't speak to the woman's perspective on it. I can a little bit, but from the guy's perspective, I think they're as guilty as women as thinking this is just, if I just get into it, she's amazing, blinders on, you never see any of her faults, and it's just going to be perfect from day one and forevermore. And as you know, and I know, marriage is a job. It's a full time job. You always have to be working on it. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad. There's going to be ebbs and flows in every aspect of it. And I I think what I see now is that the minute you hit a speed bump, everything just falls apart. Whereas maybe a few years back, and I could be wrong on this, there was more willingness to say, all right, we've hit a speed bump, maybe we need to work on it. Whereas now marriage is completely disposable, or relationships.
But you're not wrong. I wrote this, I tell this all the time. Now, when you date, you literally pretty much have the length of a drink to decide if you want to see this person again. It's like having an interview for a job you don't even know if you want. And
Right.
like back in the day when you had a group of friends, if somebody rubbed you the wrong way, well, too bad. You're going to suck it up. And eventually you guys become friends because you don't just stop hanging out with your friends and you didn't have social media to just run to all the time. And now it's like, oh, yeah, no, we're good. I'm just going to push you aside next. And that it's become like an assembly line. So people are like, when people say, well, I can't find a good relationship, I can't do this, because anything worth having like that is built. It's built.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's all found out in the details that come about through open conversation. People don't want to have that. It's like they're waiting to be love struck or something ridiculous. And it's like you're burning through people like they don't matter. You're desensitizing yourself.
Well, and it's funny you say it that way because one of the things that I talk about in my videos all the time is the perception that men have, and I think it's mostly right, is when they look at how women view men, the man can do 99 out of 100 things right, and she won't see any of it. She won't acknowledge it. She won't appreciate it. That one thing, whatever it is that he does wrong, she's going to obsess over it. And I've heard this from thousands of men over the years. I used to run a domestic violence group. Same, it came up even in that, and we weren't focusing on fixing relationships in that case because hello, but even then we would talk about it, and this was 20 odd years ago, Natalie, and I was like, there's something to this, right? We may not be exactly on with it, but we're not far off from the truth, and I think that's again going back to where we are now. I think it's even worse now.
I feel like marriages and long-term relationships have actually just become a power struggle.
Interesting. How so?
It's like you said, like, if you fill out this many things, then I'll do this. If you, well, I'm not doing that unless you do these things. And it's like, at what point did you guys start poking holes in your marital boat?
Mm.
Like, why? When you guys decided to get married, when you took these vows, which many don't even understand, they could tell you their vows. If they were traditional vows, I guarantee you, so many people, because they come to me, they're like, sex isn't part of the vows. What do you think to have and to hold means?
That's a good point. I've used that one myself.
Like, I don't want the till death if it doesn't have to love and honor as well.
It's kind of part and parcel, right? I mean, if again, this is stuff that I struggle to communicate with people is exactly your point there, right? So, I mean, you hear it all the time, well, sex isn't necessarily part of a marriage. Yeah, it
Yeah,
kind of is, because if otherwise you're roommates.
if you're if you I think monogamy is a default setting everyone goes to, and then they discuss if they want to be sexless or open, but
Mm-hmm.
monogamy is the default setting, and monogamy is not interchangeable with sexlessness any more than it's interchangeable with openness without a conversation and consent. So when people come to me and they say, and unlike you, I have half women half men talking about sexless marriages.
Mm-hmm.
um and they they really they struggle with shit.
Take your time. It's all good. You lost your train of thought. You're like
I
my
did.
you're like my partner on my live show, Squirrely Girl. The squirrel goes into the cage and then leaves. It's
I'm
all
like,
good.
wait a second. I have a lot of notes and I'm like,
Well, you
ah.
were talking about like you talk to both men and women, right? That are in sexless marriages, and I guess while you're thinking, I'll throw another question at you, because that was a great point you made. Is I don't speak to women about it, but my perception of women who are in them is that their arguments are the same as men's or close to them. Would that be a fair like? They want it as much as when it's the other way around, because I always talk about it in terms of men not getting any, but it's fair to say it happens to women also.
Oh, if you go into those sexless marriage groups or sexless relationship groups, half are women. half are women.
And that doesn't
So
surprise me.
they've taken a backseat to porn, low testosterone, ED. Just here's one thing I really want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that we have really done a disservice to men for is this: I'm 46, and the belief has always been all men want sex all the time, and that is simply not true. So when we hear men talk about the dead bedroom or sexless, sexless marriage, they're allowed to, because they're like, it's always been called getting lucky. And it's just been something we know that, like, women reach an age and, sex isn't that important or whatever. And it's supposed to be uniform for women, but it's not. And then you have these women getting into marriages with these men, and these men don't want to talk about it, because why are they the only men that don't want sex? And their wives don't want to talk about it, because how the hell did they become the one person that men don't want to have sex with? And it becomes very scary, shameful, and isolating. So where men will come online and be like, hey, I don't have sex, this is wrong, I'm going to start blah, 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 they're more vocal about it, it's more accepted. Where women are more likely to allow the men to save face and kind of like isolate their own shame into, like, what is going on? If all men want sex all the time, why is mine not? What did I do?
What's
Because
wrong
I'm
with me,
constantly
right?
waiting. Yeah, I'm constantly waiting. I'm begging. I'm begging for them to go to help. I'm begging for anything at all. And I'm getting nothing. I'm getting stonewalled. If you don't like it, you can go. I'm not doing anything about it. Too bad. We've had enough sex for our lifetime.
So, I mean, in a manner of speaking, it's essentially the same way the guys feel,
Yeah.
right?
It's
It's
rejection. It's
yeah,
loss. It's like,
it's
it's,
humiliating.
when someone says, all right, fine, we'll have sex twice a week. I'm always, my thing is this is like, unless you're actually going to do the work, change your thoughts, to change your feelings, to actually desire your partner, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work, because it's one thing to be like, okay, I'll perform sex once a week. It's another thing to feel desired, wanted, all of
Oh
those
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And sex is not enough. They want all of that, everything they signed on for, everything they were promised.
It's interesting because I had this conversation with a guy not too long ago, where I'm going to narrow down the whole conversation very quickly as I can. Basically, they hadn't had any intimacy in months. They went to see a marriage counselor about it. And the marriage counselor proposed exactly what you said. Well, you need to make an effort 2 times a week, right? And the guy said to me, to be fair, she did make the effort, but it was like she might as well have been a rubber doll. She just
Yeah.
laid there. And he said that was worse than not having it. And I have to be honest with you, Natalie, I struggled with that. I'm like, wait a minute. Not getting any at all was better for you than that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, we had a long conversation with that, and I finally understood it. But my initial reaction was like, that doesn't make sense to me, and I get it now. That, to me, God, if I ever got in that situation, I honestly don't know what I would do. I mean, you're like going through the motions trying to keep this clean, and she's just laying there, or the other way around. I could see how that would be worse, and I would feel like I wouldn't be able to do it. To be honest with you, that would be me.
It,
But
I imagine it feels like having sex with, like, a stranger who's like disinterested and just whatever, like, just get it over with. Like, that's not feeling desired either. Like, when I have things like that, when people come to my table like that, my suggestion is always, you have to change your thoughts to change your feelings. If you think, oh, we're done with it, I can't be bothered and all that, then that's how you're going to feel.
mm-hmm.
That's but what you water grows, what you nurture will grow. So if you're going to have a shitty attitude about it, well, everything else is going to follow to suit, because that's what you're doing, that's what you're creating. But if you bring back intimacy, not even necessarily the sex, just have intimacy that doesn't lead to sex, build that bond back, that would make the sex different. That would be a buildup. That would have those desirable feelings, that being in love and wanting those things from each other. But I don't think sex is something where you can just do it and hope the feelings follow later.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's how that works. I think that when it comes to men or women wanting to, reignite the sex in their marriage or relationship, it's not just the act. because there are several people who are like, I'm not opening my marriage just to have sex. I want it all in one package. I want the intimacy, the romance. I want all of that. I don't just want the act. So when you have a couple, even that's been together for 20, 30 years, and after years of rejection, they stop asking or whatever, and then they go to counseling, and it's like, well, you're just going to go back to having sex. No, that's absolutely not going to work. It's going to build a lot of resentment. Plus, it's like, when you're already feeling rejected and not desired or anything, and then you put that on top of it, it's like wearing a crown of losers. It's just
Hmm.
it's so it's so unappealing. It's
Oh,
like homework you don't want to do.
yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? Because I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm like trying to put this in my brain and wrap my head around it, and it's like, you know, and this is, I think, there's a lot of problems wrong with the mental health profession, but that's one of the things that I've had many guys say to me. I went to marriage counseling one time and never went back. And it had nothing to do with the topic at hand. It had to do with I was at fault for everything, and I wasn't allowed to talk. Basically, I'm like, why waste my time? But
How is that a thing
it,
at therapy?
but
How
it
is it
is a
not
thing.
unbiased?
It
How is that
is.
not unbiased?
It is
Oh,
so. It's something I hear, Natalie, from men daily, to be honest with you. But the other thing they'll say is when it gets to intimacy, which my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is probably right up there, top three things that men talk about that are issues in their marriage, maybe number one. But when they go to therapy and the therapist goes to what we talked about, well, you're going to do it once a week or twice a week, schedule it, put it on your calendar. All these things these guys tell me, and they almost inevitably say to me, with a couple of exceptions, it never works, right?
right.
And they end up, like I said, they end like that one guy. They end up feeling worse, and it creates even more divide because, like one guy said to me, she was doing it. I appreciated that she at least made the attempt, but she clearly didn't want to do it, and I
Mhm.
felt like I was R-ing her,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, that goes into another one, right? That's like, oh God, if I was ever in that position, well, things would shrivel up to be kind, right?
Yeah.
And yet, my impression, and correct me again if I'm wrong, that's what the mental health profession is focused on doing. That's how they try and help couples, and yet clearly it's not working.
That's not like, to me, you can schedule in time together and that should happen, because a lot of times life takes over and things go on the back burner. You should definitely schedule time together if you struggle with spending intimate time together. I just don't understand scheduling sex if there's no intimacy to begin with. Now, it's different. If you and your partner are constantly intimate and touching and that, but it's like things always get in the way, schedule sex.
Mm.
Go to a hotel, whatever you need to do, get a weekend away, schedule it. But if you're not even touching or like have intimate talks or those things, I don't see how moving, like just skipping that step and right into sex is going to do anything but create more issues.
Well, to me, it takes the intimacy out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
part of the enjoyment of it, at least for me, is it just happens, right? That shows, I guess, desire would be the word to use, or
Yeah.
love, whatever. You know, to sit there and go, every Sunday at 8 o'clock at night, we're gonna do. And then it becomes a job for both
Yep.
parties, and that's not intimacy to me. And yet, the mental health professionals, that's what they tell you to do. And I've read books where they've said that.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the problem because it doesn't address the underlying issues, which is their relationship, in some manner of speaking, is broken. They've at one time, presumably, they loved each other, were attracted to each other. I mean, they got married. Hopefully, there at least some point there was a physical attraction, and understanding that things ebb and flow. That's going to happen. But if you end up in a position, I had a guy, checked at least 2 years ago now, that I talked to extensively. He was 64 years old, and his wife said to him, "We're done. We're never having sex again. I have no interest in it, blah, blah, blah." And then she said, "And if you try and leave me, I'm going to divorce you and take everything." And
Yep.
he was the sole breadwinner. So that got into a whole domestic violence thing that I helped him with. But when you get to those type of situations, and they happen a lot because I hear about it, what is your advice to either party that is on the let's call it not on the receiving end, if you will, right? The one that's being denied. What do they do in that situation?
I always say it's up to you to advocate for yourself in your life and in your relationships. If you do not speak up for yourself, you're being dragged along. And in a lot of these instances, silence is compliance.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're dragged along so long. That's why that hope dwindles. They breadcrumb like maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, if you do this, this, and this. But the goalposts are constantly moved, 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 moved. And then before you know it, they've built this entire life, and it's like, what are you gonna leave just for sex? As if removing respect, their voice, and their choices wasn't on the table the whole time.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, you're gonna leave for sex? No, I'm gonna leave because you're wasting my years, not spending my years.
Mm-hmm.
I get no say in my future or in my life. And one thing I hear a lot is, I can't do that, my body, my choice. Okay, I
Oh, that
totally
one.
understand that.
Oh, that one. Oh.
You have a body and a choice. I have a body and a choice. And I didn't sign up for, nor did I agree to sexlessness. So how can you have a body and a choice, but I don't?
Mm.
Because we've wrapped sex in love, in intimacy, in marriage, and this is everything to us, and it is just this like Fabergé egg, and it's so amazing. And then all of a sudden, it's fucking garbage. We
Right.
don't talk about it. It's shame. It's embarrassment. It's all those things where it's like, how can sex go from something that is like a pillar in our relationship? It was so big that I cannot get it from anywhere else, but not so important I'm going to get it within my marriage, but also very important I'm not going to allow to be able to get it outside of my marriage. Like when it becomes like that, if that's what sex looks like, in my opinion, it's over.
Oh, I
Because
agree. Yeah.
you've taken something that you used as a mark of love to now throw as shame. You're using you're using it as a way to either keep something intact, probably control.
Mm-hmm. It is a power and control thing.
It is absolutely about power and control.
Yep.
Um,
Which makes it domestic violence. People don't understand that.
actually,
You know,
actually,
go ahead.
um, yeah, you're right. Actually, it is because like I taught anger management, so
Yep.
we'd have to vet out people with domestic violence because domestic violence is about power and control.
Yep.
So when one person is deciding for both the sex, when, if, any of those things, the quality, the value of it, without ever conversing with their partner or constantly shaming their partner about it and things like that to me, that is that's warfare.
Oh, it absolutely, and that's the, again, I'm speaking from the male perspective. I'm sure you hear it from the women too, but
Yep.
that's one of the biggest issues that the men have with it, right? Is the mistake they struggle with, to put, not to blame them, but to put some responsibility on them, is they don't communicate, right? They just shut down, most of the guys that I talk to anyway. But the other side of it is they get to that point because if they try and bring it up, hey, honey, we haven't done it in 2 months, whatever, next, they say next, and she comes back with things that basically equate to domestic violence, power and control,
Yep.
and they come to me at that point, like, what do I do? My answer is get out. And I've had conversations with guys because, that's an area of expertise on me. I ran a domestic violence group for men, and so many of them, I would say, Natalie, truthfully, 90 to 95% of them, in some form, that was used as a means of power and control over them,
Yep.
and weaponized against them. And when you have that, to me, there's only one option: leave. Because that's when it's at that point, my personal opinion is you cannot overcome that. That's different than you've kind of stopped communicating and things are broken, but it's not like a power and control situation. They're two different things to me, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're kind of intertwined. What do you think?
I feel like when it comes to sex, for whatever reason, there's in these marriages, one feels completely empowered and entitled to hold on to it as if they're the only person that has access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And So my question when that comes to my table is, what else are you going to remove without consent or agreement?
Mm,
Where does my voice matter? And here's another thing: if my voice and choices no longer matter, what are we doing? Why am I here? What do you want from me? What do you want with me?
right.
Because it was funny when I first started on TikTok. This guy comes. This one guy was on all my stuff, and he's like, "Sex isn't the most important thing." It was a guy, and he was just going off, which told me he probably has issues with sex, and so it can't be the worst thing, right? So he's going off and off and off, and this other guy comes on, and he goes, "Hey, the bathroom isn't the most important room in the house, but I'm still not buying a house without one."
I love that.
Right?
That's
Right?
awesome. That is, I got to steal that.
Yeah,
That is
I always
great.
do. I use it all the
I
time.
got
Now,
to use
whenever
it.
someone says that, I'm like, back up, back up. Let's talk about this. If sex was a big deal in your relationship at the beginning and you two did not agree that it's not a big deal now, you got to figure that out. Because if it's not a big deal to you, but it's a very big deal to your partner still, what are you going to do?
And again, you speak to both men and women. I'm coming at it from the male side, but so many men are like, she's not my wife, she's my roommate. That's the phrase I hear all the time. We're not husband and wife, we're roommates. And that's how they feel. And that's essentially when they're talking with me about it, that's what their relationship is. It's no different than if she was a roommate, right? Because what is the difference between a marriage and roommates? Financially, you're intertwined as a roommate, basically, right? You're presumably you're paying the bills together. All the other stuff, you're going to go do things as friends and all that. That's all well and good. Same thing with a friendship. But the one thing that separates all that from a relationship between man and what, for that matter, man and woman, man and man, is intimacy.
Yeah.
That's the only difference, in my opinion. And when you have that taken away, I mean, if that were to happen to me, I would check out like that. I really would. And so many guys stick with it for a lot of reasons, financial being the big one. But when you're talking with someone in that situation, whether it's a man or a woman, and they're trying to wrap their head around it, like, what is the biggest struggle that you see them having to go through to kind of make their decision? Like, if you, let's say you've been married 20 years and all of a sudden it's dead bedroom, I guess I'll use, and now you're coming to like, this is not going to work for me. I'm
Right.
50 years old. I got 20 more or 30 years more left. I am not doing it. What's the struggle you see, and how do you get them through it?
A lot of people think there's just like, I don't want to start over. And I was like, okay, so you're going to drag the dead horse for the rest of your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, like I get that you don't want to start over, but there's going to come a time when you're going to look in your rear view mirror and go, yeah, I still have my house. I still have my wife or husband. I still have my money, but like, I'm ready for the sweet release of death.
That's not
Like,
living.
that's not living at all. But you want to know something, honestly? People feel shame because they're made to feel shame, even by society standards, if you leave because of lack of sex.
Mm.
But if someone cheats, that's fine. You're free to go. That doesn't, cheating doesn't fall under the whole, for better or for worse. But if your partner decides, hey, yeah, we're just done, I can't be bothered, and you're done too, well, that's for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And people would rather have, people would rather struggle in silence about having a dead bedroom, even if they're in separate bedrooms and it's like deteriorated and they barely talk, over what will they say if we get a divorce?
So
Like,
that's interesting. So they're more worried about how they'll be perceived
yeah.
versus solving the problem one way or the other.
So a lot are like that. Like, what will people think of me? People, I'll be made out to be the bad guy. I'll be made out to be this. Not. I go, what do you care? You're not even married to these people. Like, why are you playing to an audience
Mm.
that doesn't even matter? This is your life. How you spend it is going to impact you. These people with opinions, guess what? In an hour, they won't even have them anymore. And unless they're asked for it, they won't care. Like, and not, so part of it is that they don't want the stigma of divorce, but a lot of it is this, is that I think the sex and the miscommunication or uncommunication or no communication is what starts the bridges.
Mhm.
But another thing that stops the divorce is people are like, I'm not paying for that.
Financial. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like financial. I'm like, hey, if you don't want to leave financially, I totally understand that. But can we break the marriage into a partnership then? Like a legitimate partnership? Because if the only reason you guys are staying together at this point is finances, okay. My favorite is when they say, we're going to stay together for the kids. Oh, perfect. So that tells me you're going to counseling and you're going to make the house a loving and safe environment for the children. And on the backside of that, are you going to fake an entire relationship in front of your children? Because they're going to model their future ones after you. And if that
Mm.
creates, you know, trust issues when they move away and you guys part ways or whatever, what's that going to look like later on? Like, I think we've done so much damage to marriage either by overworking it or just letting it go as if it'll just do its own. If you marry the right person, it's going to be effortless. I feel like we've really done a lot of damage. We've told people you have to stay together for the kids when those kids do not need that. Like if the house isn't going to be made for the kids, don't stay together for the kids.
Now that's an interesting point that you're making because I hear the same thing, by the way. But yeah, what I always say in my mind is that to me seems old school, right?
Yeah.
It's that's what we were telling people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Now, from the 70s till the 2020s, divorce has become far more acceptable, many ways celebrated. Oh, cool, you got divorced, right? So we're moving. I think we're moving away from staying together for the kids, which again, I will reiterate, I think is a bad thing to do because you're to your point, if you're faking it, the kids are going to know it. People think they're fooling their kids. Kids are extremely intelligent. They're going to see right through it. And then when they get older, that's what they're going to do, right? We always
Well,
mirror our parents.
and here's my thing. I'm like, if you're going to stay together for the kids because you're like, we want them to have access to us, in these four walls and no other man or woman's going to come in here, but we want access to them. Fine. I totally understand that. Do that. But that still does not require you fake an entire relationship in front of them.
And it's interesting now because when I talk with guys, one of the things I do is I coach them mostly when they're in family court. But I have guys reach out to me that are thinking about going for a divorce. And well,
Yeah.
when I'm having the conversation with them, and I mean, there's a wide number of reasons that they'll throw out, but one of the biggest is intimacy's gone. And they'll say, my worry is the financial side. By far the number one thing I hear. And I'm like, and to what you've mentioned, and my stern belief is you can always rebuild the financial side.
Mhm.
If you, why live in misery? I would rather live in my car, okay, than put up with that. But a lot of these guys can't move past that. And I'm sure it happens to women as well. When you're working with someone like that, this is one of the big things I wanted to ask you because it's something I hear all the time when they're trying to decide should I divorce. And I just give them my viewpoints or ask questions. I never make the decision for them. I'm very much against that. It's not my place to. But I'll say, well, have you thought about this? Here's the reality what you're going to deal with in family court. Blah, blah, blah. And try and help them have the parameters to make a decision. But when you're working with them, you're coming at it from a different perspective, which is hopefully trying to help their relationship. How do you approach that? And like, what would you say to a guy who comes to you and says, Natalie, I'm thinking about getting a divorce. We haven't been intimate in a year. Um, but I'm worried about I'm not going to be able to see my kids. I'm not going to be able. I'm going to be living on the street. Blah blah blah. You know what I'm talking about. What do you say to those guys? Because I don't know what to say.
Well, I ask always, will your partner come to the table and talk? Will they discuss this?
Okay.
Is is divorce absolute, or can you open the marriage so you don't break apart the empire if that's the issue? A lot of people don't want to break apart the empire. Okay, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
So are you willing to open the marriage? Now, if they say we're not opening the marriage and you know this is kind of the way it is. This is my thing. Listen, I'm not here to pull you off your tracks. If you have to make decisions because that it impacts you. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't impact me. If you decide to stay because you want to keep the money, get a support group. Find a support group and get supports because you're not going to leave anyway. So you might as well find a way to reframe your situation so that you can try to find happiness to be in it. for the duration. But here's another thing. It's like, how much money is your happiness worth?
That's
And
my
your
question.
future
That's what I
years.
always throw at them. Exactly that.
Like, I I think a lot that most marriages fail, are in failure, are stagnant, whatever. And I think it literally all comes down to communication. I think a lot of people, most people didn't have conversations in depth enough before they were married, during marriage, or anything. I think that they just accept things and then struggle with it throughout. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there was no talk about what does like, my son is 27, he's dating a woman, a young lady, she's lovely, but they're at that age, right? Like, and I said, hey, you know, you didn't ask, but if I could offer you just 3 tips of advice, always make sure you can say the scariest things to each other, because if you can say that, there isn't anything you won't talk about. um, Make sure that what you're on the same page financially. You really want to make sure,
Mm-hmm.
if you're building an empire together, that you guys have the same spending habits, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the love of all things holy, please talk about sex. Please talk about sex. Like, what's that going to look like in 50 years? Do you promise to take care of your sexual health, your mental health, and your physical health, your emotional, your spiritual health for the rest of our lives? Do you promise to not give up on sex? Because if we can only get it from each other, that's something that has to be nurtured constantly, consistently. That's something I want for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be okay in 20 years if you decide, no, thank you. It doesn't matter. Like, I get a lot on my posts that say, well, just wait until menopause hits you. And I'm like, okay, like, I've been in perimenopause for probably 4 years, and I have a team of doctors to help me with my hormones, because guess what? Menopause was never a freaking secret. I knew as a woman I was going to hit it, and I might hit it hard. And I have.
It's
But I
inevitable. It's
didn't.
biology, and we're all gonna.
So why is it a shock when people are like, wait till you hit menopause? I'm in perimenopause. I have all those symptoms that make me just a lovely fucking human being. And I work with doctors because, you know what? It was never a secret to me that for 15 years I would probably struggle, not know what's going on in things, because we didn't talk about it. Even in that, we didn't talk about it in depth. It was just, you're going to get hot flashes and it's going to suck. No, no, no. The whole person you are freaking changes. You need a team to help you move through. So that's what I did, because I have no interest in being a miserable person, zero. And I have even less of making my house a miserable place for my husband and children. There's just no way. I'm not giving up my life for that shit.
It's funny because I was chuckling because I've been through menopause 3 times, 3 wives, 3 menopauses, so I get that part of it. But one of the things that I have found, and I see this when I'm talking with people as a fitness trainer, because I am also a fitness trainer, a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach. I work with people that are power lifters and competing. One of the things that I often hear from the women that I train is that I'm about to go into menopause or I've been through menopause, and I'm like, that's an excuse. Stop using it. Because I've had women in their 60s, like the classic one, I can't lose weight because I've been through menopause. That's a load of crap, all right? Because I
Right.
have many thousands of women I've helped over 40 years as a trainer to lose weight in their 60s and 70s. But I think that goes back to what you're talking about, where that becomes, I view it as somebody who throws that out with relationships or intimacy, wait till you get to menopause. They're either pre planning their excuse or they're going to use it as an excuse. And that's not true. Yes, it's a
Well,
biological fact where men go through menopause, as I call it. For us, it starts in our 20s and it takes about 30 years to go through it. That's a biological fact,
yeah.
right? So why is this even a discussion? And that's kind of what your point is, right?
I think a lot, whether it's menopause or any other excuse, I think a lot of people, like, fell into that trap for themselves. And misery loves company, loves
Yeah.
generations of company.
Yes.
So it's like, you're going to fail like I failed, rather than, why didn't you try like I'm trying?
Mm-hmm.
They want that. Like, that's why you see so few like rally around it. They want that. They want you to fail like I failed. Like, don't push too hard. That's just the way it is. No, no, no. That's the way you are.
Right.
That's the way marriage is. No, no, no. That's the way you made your marriage. That has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't necessarily, when they fell into the marriage trap, whichever trap they fell into, and they just went along with it, whether it was no intimacy and now it's going on 30 years, and they're like, well, that's the way it is. Nope. Nope. That's the way yours is. Has nothing to do with me or anyone else.
Well, it's the way you've allowed it to become, right?
100%.
That's why I always say to people, look, whatever your situation is, you may not be totally responsible for it, but you own at least 50% of it. And you can't control what the other person's doing, but you can control your response to it, right?
100%.
So when, whatever excuse, I'm going to use the word excuse, whatever excuse they're offering, if you accept that excuse or you buy into it, that's as much your fault as it is on them for making it, right? And I see this, it's funny, you were talking earlier about communication, especially with regard to sex, intimacy, and all that with couples. And it's something I've struggled with. So here's the person that in theory is your best friend in life. You should be able to say anything to. And there are times I have, even now, and I'm very happily married, but even now, I feel more comfortable talking with my best friend, who happens to be a woman, about certain things than I do my wife, right? And that's my fault. How did I there's times I sit there and go like, you asshole, how did you, what the hell, right? And nothing negative to my wife. It's mine, not her. It's me. And I'm like, and I'm better than most. I got to believe it happens a lot more than even I think. And how do you get people to overcome that? And how do we even get to that point? Like, is it society? Is it in the U.S. in particular, that taboo against sex? It's, oh my God, you're talking about sex. If you can't talk about it with your significant other, who the hell can you talk about it?
But I think nobody taught us how to talk about it. Because think about when you've seen marriages, you've seen them, but you didn't necessarily know the details of them. They either came across as good to you or not good to you. But like my parents didn't, short of like birds and the bees, nobody really, not that I've heard of, was ever told about these conversations like, hey, what's sex going to look like in 40 years for us? Like, do you plan on doing, because we're monogamous. Like, what do you like? What don't you like? Another thing that a lot of people didn't talk about was, do you have trauma?
Yeah, that never
That
comes
they
up.
packed along and brought it in later on
Mm-hmm.
for later on, and no one knew except for that person. And then it's like, well, I'm dealing with trauma. Okay, but you're still the only person that can heal that. So chop, chop.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't be open and honest with your partner, the person you're in a marital boat with, and the marriage rests in the family, not the other way around. The marriage rests in the family. It's between those two people. If you cannot speak to them openly and honestly about sex, I literally have no idea the foundation your marriage rests on.
And
Because
that's what I hear
why?
from guys all the time is I can't talk to her about it. And that's, again, I don't have an answer for them because I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, dude, right? If you can't talk to her, you don't have a relationship. That's my answer.
But when they say I can't talk to them, is it I don't know what to say or they won't listen?
Fear. It's fear. The
They have a
number,
lot, yeah. A lot of men that come through my page and
yeah.
women too are a lot like, I don't even want to bring it up anymore because it just melts into a fight. And I was like, one of the videos I reposted and I was like, you ever just stand there and be like, hey, I want to know why my voice no longer matters in my marriage or my future. I want to know why my choices aren't even on the table. I want to know when
Mm-hmm.
you decided we were never going to have sex again for the rest of our lives. I want to know the catalyst that made you feel okay with never having sex with me again. And I want to know anything else you plan to pull off the table without a conversation or consent. When did our marriage become you dragging me along?
And I get all that, right? And I don't disagree with you. Don't. But the thing I hear from guys is I can't say that because she'll file for divorce. Or again, it goes into that power and control. She's established And by the way, it goes both ways. Women go
Yeah.
through this as well. But I'm going to come at it from the male perspective because
Yep.
that's who I talk to. Um, I can't do that. They're literally, in some case, I had one guy say, if I tried to do that, I would not know what to say. I would shake in fear. And I'm like, I understand that, dude, but you got two choices. You either do it or you live in the hell that you're living in, right? And then the other thing they'll throw at me, just to kind of throw out there, is if I do that, and this happens to men all the time, she's going to turn it around and make it about her. She's going to use the ultimate excuse, which is, well, if you force me into it, you're R-ing me, right? Or something like that. And again, I struggle with that because I don't have an answer. That's where I just say you need to go talk to a therapist because it's way out of my league. But I hear it all the time, Natalie, all the time from guys is because I'll say to them, "When was the last time you talked to her about it?" "Oh, I can't do that," and I'm like, "Why?" "Oh, no, 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 no. If I do that, I'm gonna pay for it, right?" And to be fair, they will in a lot of cases, but that doesn't mean you don't do it.
Well, and I think what people like, I mean, we have to be realistic. We don't have control over how other people react.
Right.
Are they going to melt down? Maybe. But you still have a voice. The longer you stay silent, the more it becomes acceptable to that other person. And monogamy is not sexlessness. So when somebody comes to the table and they're like, well, I don't want to do it and I don't want to be forced to do it, I can completely understand that. I don't think you should have to be forced to do it. But you cannot, in good conscience, force your partner to be celibate because you can't be bothered.
My argument is it's
I'm just
no
a hard
different then.
pass.
Yeah,
Like
that's every bit as bad. Denying it is every bit as bad as demanding it. That's my argument.
100%. If you're the only person I'm allowed to even have sex with,
Hey fans, I just wanted to take a quick break from the show to remind you just how much we here at Men Need to Be Heard truly appreciate and value your support. And we'd like to ask you to do us a little favor. It won't cost you a dime, and it'll only take a few seconds out of your day. Could you take a moment to give us that like, give us that thumbs up on the video, and even share it with your friends? Doing so will help us to spread the word and continue to raise awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's modern world. And we'd love to hear what you have to say on today's topic. So don't forget to comment down below and let us know how we're doing. Your input and feedback means the world to us, and it helps us to continue bringing great guests and even more content each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. It's the best way to stay up to date with all of our latest discussions, interviews, and deep dives into the issues men and boys face. It also helps the channel to grow so that we can continue to raise even more awareness on the issues. So hit that subscribe button and become part of the Men Need to Be Heard community. All right, that's it for now. Back to the show.
why are you holding it like the Holy Grail and I'm not allowed to have any of it?
Yep.
That was not the agreement I signed on for. That was not what we agreed to ever at all.
And that, again, that's what, again, I'm relating what guys say to me because it's, when you talk to them and they're going through this, I hear the pain in their voice. I really
Right.
do because, and I want to get kind of explore this a little bit with you. So, to use their term, which again, I didn't know up until about a year ago, I'm stuck in a dead bedroom. And, we haven't had intimacy or relations, they'll phrase it different ways, sex, in X amount of time. And I'll say, okay, I hate the phrase, how does that make you feel? Which every therapist in the world uses. The worst phrase ever. But I'll say to them, well, how's it affecting you? I don't ask them how it makes them feel. I'm like, how does it affect you? And in some cases, it's physical, mental, emotional, all that stuff. So when I want to kind of draw on your expertise on that is one, can you describe what you would define as an actual dead bedroom? Because I think there's a lot of misnomer on that. Some people, I've actually had somebody say, well, it's not a dead bedroom till it's been a year and you haven't gotten any. I've had others say a week or a month, and I don't know what the answer is to it. How would you kind of
Um,
qualify that? Because to me, it would be dependent on the relationship. But that first of all, and then what are the effects on the people?
well, there's a dead bedroom and there's a dormant.
Okay.
So with dormant, it's like, is sex done with us? If I leave tomorrow, are you going to find your sex drive and secure another partner?
Mm-hmm.
Or is sex dead? So when I looked a couple of years ago, sexlessness was like less than twice a month. For me, dead bedroom is zero, none, zip.
For how long a period, though, roughly? I mean, it's going to vary, but if you had
Yeah,
a
I would say like in my house, a dead bedroom would be 3 months for sure. It
okay,
wouldn't go through
okay,
without it. Like, and that's tough for me to say only because it's like we always talk. So it would have to be like extenuating circumstances. And even then, I would still probably say in my circumstances, it might be dormant. But if in 3 months you're not having sex and you can't talk about it, or it's not coming back, or there's just excuse, that's a dead bedroom.
okay.
And the longer it stays like that, the more you're going to find probably two dead bedrooms because a lot of people just get their own rooms in.
And we have to have the understanding that everybody's going to view that time frame differently. You're saying 3 months. Somebody else may say it's a month. Somebody else may say it's a year. Whatever. And there's no
Depending
right
on
or
how it's
wrong.
happening.
It's
Yeah.
how it affects you. And
Yeah.
and that's why when guys throw that, because they throw it out so often. And I've had guys, well, it's been a week. I have a dead bedroom. I'm like, that to me doesn't make sense, right? Because
Yeah.
there are inevitably going to be ebbs and flows. Inevitably, right? Something back in my IT days, there were times I was working 100 hours a week. The last thing on my mind was intimacy. And it might be
Right.
if I'm on a project that, I'm trying to rebuild, say, a server farm that's going to take a month, that month, probably nothing's going to happen because that's all my brain is focused on, right?
Yeah.
That's not to me what a dead bedroom is. Dormant, that's a great, I like that phrase. I'm going to steal that one too if I can.
Yeah.
Because it's a great phase. But it's nothing, there's not a problem there. There's something that's causing it, but it's a temporary thing and it'll be fixed. But I struggle with because so many guys they want to put this specific number to it. I don't think there should be one. But then they to kind of get into the effects it has because one of the things I've said to guys is, well, all right, I'll accept that whatever number you have is the case, but that's not the issue. The issue is what is the effect it's having on you, right? How is it affecting you physically, emotionally, mentally, all that stuff? And they never want to get into that. They become focused on, well, I just want to get some. So what, like when you run into, I'm sure you run into it far more than I do. When you run into that, what's the conversation go like?
Like to get back in the bedroom.
Well, to kind of refocus their issue, because to me, right, the issue is they want to get back in the bedroom, but they've got to address to me, and I could be wrong, and you could please feel free to tell me I am, okay? If they don't come to grips with their own beliefs and making them, for lack of a better term, realistic, right? Um, that's to me is the first step, and I could be wrong on that because if you're sitting there going, it's been 5 days, I'm in a dead bedroom, you're creating a war that might not exist.
Right. So just being able to express yourself openly and freely to your partner. And I think it's like, to me, like when somebody is struggling with that, it's like you have to let them know how you feel. It's like they don't care. No, no, no. You have to let them know this is not just fleeting. My I'm hurting. My mental health is deteriorating. I don't feel valued. I don't feel loved. I don't feel wanted. I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
desired. I don't know if you want to be in the marriage anymore. I don't know if we're even partners. Do you even like me? Like, what happened? Because I'm struggling in our marriage. I'm struggling in my life, and you have the answers, and I need those answers. I need you to help me with this.
See,
I'm asking you to help me.
I love the way you just put that, and I think to me, rather than putting a number to it, that's the better way to look at it, right? Is like I just referred to. If you're on a project and it's been a month and all that, that's a totally separate thing. But if you're at a point where whatever amount of time it's been and you're starting to feel depression, anger, because guys get angry, I'm sure women do too, but all those emotions start coming out. That's when I'm talking with guys. That's what I'm trying to draw out of them is how is it affecting? Well, it's making me pissed off at her all the time. Well, okay, you better effing address it then, because you're doomed if you don't, right?
And that's another thing. It's like it's great that you talk to your friends and things like that, but if you're not talking to the one person who can help you,
Yes.
then it's not going to matter. And also, why are we letting so much time elapse? Like, why are we allowing that to happen? Why are we not just checking in all the time and like, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything today? Can I help you with anything? Like, being a good partner sometimes, provokes good partners. So it's like, why are we letting it go months on end? And then when it turns sour, why are we allowing that to be the new narrative?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are being dragged along because sex went from love to shame and now they don't want to talk about it because they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
How can you be afraid to talk about something in your marriage and still have a good marriage?
That's the point. That's the key, right? If you can't have that conversation, you don't have a good marriage. Period.
But why would you want your partner to feel devalued, undesired, unloved, unwanted? Why would you want, when you can clear all the confusion with clarity in a conversation, why wouldn't you do that? Because you don't want to take the accountability, because with accountability, change is expected to follow, and they're not interested in changing because right now they have everything they want, all in the comfort. So I also tell that other person, hey, well, you're keeping the peace. Understand yours is not even being considered in that. So,
And then, if you are able to have the conversation, I want to kind of shift this a little bit because, again, there are guys that are willing to do that. But as so many of them say to me, well, she said I need to do, if I did more of this, the whole conditional thing, which is something I talk about in my videos all the time, right? The minute you have any kind of list, it is no longer intimacy, it's prostitution. Sorry, I'm going to say it that way. If he has to do the dishes, vacuum, the laundry, and all this stuff, and then you'll give him something, you're exchanging a value for intimacy. That's my argument, right? And it goes both ways, by the way. And
well,
she could be the guy is trading sex and intimacy for money or an item, if you will, right? And something has happened, so she's going to reward him for being a good little boy. And I see that expanding recently. There are so many women. I make sport of it. I make video after video about it because they overtly say it, and it makes guys feel like crap,
yeah.
like absolute crap. I mean, it hurts them. It hurts them mentally, emotionally. They're like, all she wants me for is my money. I hear that one all the time. Or, if I do the dishes, well, I might get some because the other one they'll say is she promises it and never delivers.
Mm-hmm.
And my argument to them often is, dude, get out. It's depending on the level of it, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not the first answer, but if you've had a conversation and she's still doing it, get out.
Well,
What do you feel about all that?
I hear a lot of men too on my feed that if she stops having sex, I'm going to stop paying the bills. I really think that I think if you're married, transactional sex is just the freaking way it is. I honestly do. Cause I'm like, why would anyone people get married for religious reasons, family reasons, all those things. But it's like, if you just want to exchange stuff, find somebody who also wants to exchange things. But when you have built a relationship and sex was included and as a way to show love and affection, and now it's a reward system, you are absolutely smashing your marriage.
There is no marriage at that point. It's
I think that is just that to me is just break her down. Either break it into a partnership and decide we're partners and that's the way it is and we'll open our marriage, find a mediator and part ways because
it's
the goalposts are always going to be moved. You're still
oh
dealing with
yeah.
essentially still not being desired, still not being wanted, still not any of those things. But I'll get a cookie if I do this. That's not what you signed on for either. And using money as a way to control, using sex as a way to control, using the children as a way to control, it breaks everything. It just smashes it all.
Well, it's funny because when I make these videos in response to that, saying basically what you just did, right? Oh, they come out of the woodwork for me, right? The women. They're like, that's not what it's about. Okay, what is it about? I just want him to pay attention. I want him to want, I love this phrase. This is the one that kills me. I want him to want to do the dishes. And if he just did them, then I will be more likely to give him what he wants. And I'm like, you've made it transactional, you've made it conditional. Why shouldn't he just go see a prostitute in Vegas? Not that
Yeah.
I would ever advocate for that, but
I have no issues with that. I have no issues with sex workers at all
really.
because you're seeing it in marriages. So what's the difference?
Yeah, I see. To me, it's not that I have a problem with it. It's that if you are married, get out of the marriage before you do it. I and again, we may disagree on this. I just think if you're in a marriage, not a relationship, I'm going to separate, say, a long-term relationship from a marriage.
Sure.
If you've made that commitment that you are going to be monogamous, and that for whatever reason it's broken down, either side, before you cheat or before you take advantage of a sex worker or any of that, get out. That's just my personal viewpoint, right or wrong. If people can disagree with me, I have no problem with it because I understand the other side of it. But it's just when it gets to that point and it's become so transactional, the women get. Oh, Natalie, the hate that if I put a video up like that, I can guarantee you it's going to get mass reported because they women don't want me talking about it. They hate it because, in essence, I'm calling them prostitutes, but that's what they are. If he has to meet X, Y, Z criteria, check a bunch of boxes off a list, and then you're going to decide to be intimate with him, you aren't being intimate. You are being a sex worker.
Well, I think they have the checklist wrong. Whoever does it, it's like if my checklist for me and my husband is respect, compassion, checking in, talking to me, conversation, boundaries.
That's a
That's
difference. That's what men
his
want.
character. Those things. Those things are what. Yeah,
Yes.
I could give a shit if he does the dishes. That's me though. Like I have my partner's incredible. Like my partner is incredible. He's given me 7 lifetimes. Like whatever he wants, it's a yeah. Like I have like a partner that was just the best person in the whole world. So it's like, but I don't ever have to ask that stuff either.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? But when you start having like, it's like, okay, well, if you do this, this, and this, that is transactional because it's not even about who that person is. It's about what they can do for you.
Right. Exactly. And you can get that from, go to Vegas or wherever. I don't even know, but
That's more of that power struggle of
it
you do
is.
this and I'll do this, then you do that and I'll
Yes.
do this. And it's like, why are you weakening your own freaking team? Like, what the fuck is going on? That's the go-to. You said together forever. If there was only 2 people on the planet and you two, would you be happy? Like, here's the thing. When COVID happened and the world shut down, I closed my door and I looked at my deserted island, which is my house, and I was like, yes, I picked the right person and everything. No problem. We coasted and we had to go right back into monogamy for that. It was not an issue
Uh-huh.
at all. It was not an issue. But we knew in that time, like within the first day, let alone years, that it was like, okay, perfect. We picked the right people to be on our deserted island. A lot of other people looked at their deserted islands and were like, good God, I would do anything to get off of this. And then when everything opened up, they did fuck all to get off of it.
It's funny because one of the things that and I don't know if I know you follow me, but one of the things I've talked about many times was COVID was the best thing that ever happened to men because they figured out real fast 2 things. One, do I want to be with her? Because now I'm stuck with her 24/7 for however long. And 2, you know what? If they're a single guy, I'm okay without being in a relationship. You know what? I got my video games. I got my, Domino's pizza and beer or whatever. I've been, trapped in the house all alone. And you know what? Life is good. And a lot of guys figured that out. A lot of them did.
You know what's funny is I get a lot of men on my TikTok and they're like, when I do sexless videos, I'm like, if my partner goes sexless, we're done. Like, you're not going to control my sex. Like, that's just a
That's
hard
me.
pass.
That would be me also. Yeah.
And they say to me, they're like, good luck with all your cats. And I'm like,
I
I
use
would
that one.
rather have several cats than be in a miserable marriage or
Fair point.
relationship,
Yep.
which made me think. And I go, your partner has essentially made you a house cat. You're not even needed. You're company. You're their comfort. You don't get anything. You are the fucking house cat. The
I
only difference between me and you is that I'm totally comfortable and happy in my own company. I don't have a husband just for someone to freaking entertain me.
right.
You're not comfortable in that. So you're happy being dragged along and shaming me for not doing the same. I don't care to be your miserable company.
And I think, to that point, I think that's what guys figured out. A lot of them, and I'm sure women did too, to be fair. But uh, I saw a huge change in men during COVID and post, and it's why they're walking away from relationships now. Right? Is they figured out I don't need a house cat, right? Or I don't want to be a house cat. If I'm going to be in a relationship, I need something of value out of it, which is the things you listed before with your partner: respect, acknowledgement, all that stuff, appreciation, and all that, which they weren't getting. Very few men get that. Very few. And the ones that do are loyal as fuck. I mean, there is nothing. If you're like you say, you give that to your partner, there's no way he's ever going to leave you. I can tell you right now. Why
Okay.
would he, right? But the other side of it is men realized, shit, I'm a hell of a lot happier not having to perform, if you will, to make her happy all the time, because her happiness is her problem, not mine.
Right. You can add to it, but here's my question. Who picks your partners?
You did.
And who's responsible to have the
You are.
conversations with your partners?
Absolutely, you
So
are.
then so then when you tell me, okay, well, men are like, we're better off without them because this, and this. So now we have a lump of men and a lump of women.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'll just blanket them. This group of men, this group of women, right? Where it's like, well, I'm not going to get in relationships anymore because this is the way it goes. Okay, that's the way it went. But what did you learn from there? You learned that you should probably have your own voice, that you have your own choices. You need boundaries. You
Mm-hmm.
need to speak up for yourself. You need to have these conversations in depth before and during. So, yeah, it's easy to be like, okay, well, you know what? It's easier for me to not date or not be in a relationship because then I don't have to do these things. Yeah, or you can vet your companions better. You can date better. You can be more intentional. You
Mm-hmm.
can choose to communicate better, to be able to express yourself. Those things. You don't have to just sit in your house and be like, I'm done with all women, because not all women are like that. And it's like when they pour in and they're like, well, what about, they won't talk about this and all women are this or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but who picks your freaking partner? You pick unless you're in an arranged marriage, you pick your partners. So what are you doing or neglecting to do that it gets to this? Because you're responsible for you and keeping yours on the track. They're responsible for them. If they're a fucking train wreck, okay. But we all don't ride the same train tracks.
Well, it's funny because what you just said, I've said to guys all the time, right? Is if you've had bad relationships, what was your role in it? What did you do wrong? Why did you pick a bad person, right? That is part of the conversation. But the other side of it, if I may play devil's advocate with you, because I agree with you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and I'm going to speak as if, because I know how the guys are going to respond to that, which
Right.
is, you're right, but women change. And to be fair, they do, right? Once
Okay.
I think
Sure.
universally, the minute they get that paper, things change. I've experienced it. I've seen it. And you know, for guys, the thing that they're always looking at that women don't is that there is the return on investment financially side of it. For example, right? So if I get into a relationship and I do everything right and we are communicating, the classic example, I'll give you the perfect example of it, Natalie, is her friends start chirping her in her ear. And it happens, right? We all know that. They're jealous, bitter, single women friends start talking to her. She's in, because my partner on the live, Lindsay, has it happen to her all the time. She's in the best relationship I've ever seen. She just came and visited me about a month ago, right? Her and her husband are so much in love, it's sickening. And I say that, in a positive way. They hold hands. They've been together for 20 years. But what she constantly has is women telling her how bad her husband is. He's awful. He's this and that. She is she's probably one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. She can resist it, but so many can't. And then they buy into it and they change. And I've experienced it. I've had guys say it to me time and time again. It is a universal belief of guys. And it's like, I did everything right, but things change. And I know it goes in the reverse. Absolutely, it does. And that's where guys are going to now, right? Because I lost everything in a divorce or two. There's no way in hell I'm going to put myself in a position. And oh, by the way, I'm finding out I'm pretty happy. If I do a video talking about something along those lines, inevitably I will have between all the social medias tens, if not hundreds of thousands of guys telling me or telling everyone how much happier they are that they've walked away. Understanding it's, we're only seeing one side of the coin there, right? But it speaks to, I think, where guys are at right now. They don't see the return on investment in relationships. All your points are valid. I 100% agree with you on all of them. I think not being in relationships and marriage is a very bad thing for society, right? If society's going to break down if marriage ends or relationships end, we are becoming so far apart as men and women right now. Society is inevitably going to fail. It is because the sum of the two parts, that whole, if you will, makes everything better. And I often say men's strengths are women's weaknesses and vice versa. Obviously, that's it's not black and white, but I truly believe that. And when we're not together, when we're so fractured as we are now, and I see the men's side of it, which is why? What is the benefit to me right now? Because the risk is that I'm going to lose everything if I get into a relationship. And that's a valid risk that they have to assess. And that's why I kind of coming at it from the guy's spot. And I by the way, I agree with what you said. I'm just throwing this out there because that's how guys think. What are your thoughts on all that?
A lot of the men that I speak to, there are ones that they want to leave and because they want to find something better, but they don't necessarily want to be alone. Now, every now and then I get these people that come through that are like, "This is why you should never be in a relationship or married." I'm like, "Cool, sounds good. Sounds like you found your way. Away you go." Like, here's the thing: when it's like, "Well, women change, we all grow." But as long as your conversation doesn't stop, you grow together. You go
Agreed.
together. You're not
Yep.
evolving out. You're evolving together. And when I would just want to touch on the whole like friends in the ears.
Oh, that thing. Yeah, that's a big
um
one for guys.
if you so much as whisper a negative thing about my husband, you cannot cross the threshold of my doorstep ever, and you can ask his mother if I'm fucking joking or not.
But see, Natalie, I love that about you. And that's how Lindsay is, by the way. If anybody says anything bad about her husband, oh God, her
We're not
claws come out.
friends.
Oh God,
We're not friends then. Yeah.
her claws will come out. She'll destroy them. But it may be perception. But from what I see, by the way, I train groups of women physically, physical fitness training, right? The volume of them trashing each other's spouses, husbands, all that, or them doing it themselves would blow your mind. And I mean,
I
I had one. This is 4 or 5 years ago. Group of about 15 women, and they went off on because this one woman said her husband was sick, the whole man flu thing, right? That group went nuts, and I'm standing there. Now they're all working out, and I'm listening to this for 30 minutes. They're trashing each other's husbands, they're trashing their husbands, the whole 9 yards. And I'm sitting here like, okay. And I let it go, let it go, let it go. And finally we got done because I didn't want to interrupt the workout. I said, ladies, I just want to ask you a question. How would your husbands feel if they were sitting here listening to that? And they all looked at me like I had my head cut off. What do you mean? You all just, by your own words, trashed your husbands and trashed each other's husbands. No, we didn't. Yeah, you did. Okay. And I sat there and I was like, as a guy, I've never forgotten that moment.
Yep.
Ever. And I never will because it's not the first time it's happened. I've seen it over and over again. So when guys say that that's a legitimate thing that they fear, that somebody's going to get in her ears, someone as strong as yourself or Lindsay or, there's plenty. My wife, if you did that to my wife, God help you, right? But that seems to me, again, I could be wrong, to be the exception, not the rule. Because I've had women tell me, all my friends are telling me to leave them. and it drives them nuts. Forget the guys; it drives them nuts that they do that.
Mhm.
And that's a it's I can't say it's the biggest fear guys have right now, but it's right up there. And it's why they don't want to get in relationships because they know no matter how good it is, she'll wear down. If you have enough people doing it and they're unlike you, they can't defend it, right? Or defend themselves. She's going to get worn down. That's human being. What do you say to all that?
Well, I remember years ago, we were at a function with friends and whatever, and these two women were talking, and our husbands all grew up together, and they were talking about how they never do housework, yada yada yada, and they said our husbands, and I was like, back up, not my husband.
Mm.
Your husbands do that. That has nothing to do with mine. Just because they grew up does not mean they're the same. My husband is more than fine with housework. We're not going to pool this together. I think a dangerous game that is played, and it's played a lot, and I don't know that it's ever going away, is not keeping your marriage private. Now, we
Yes,
both know if you are in a relationship that has domestic violence, don't stay private.
that's a whole other ballgame, right?
I don't do that. That's a completely different ballgame. Don't stay
Absolutely.
private. But in everything else, your marriage is arguably your biggest partnership you will ever have in your entire existence. It is to be private. It is to be treated with care, respect, integrity, dignity, all of those things. When you when you open the floodgates to whomever else, well, misery's going to flood in and they're going to tell you
Mm-hmm.
everything you're doing wrong and everything that it should be and this is the way it should be and yada 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 yada. And people have this overwhelming desire to like take as much information as possible and be like, yeah, I'll do this, this, and this. And it's like, for what approval?
Well,
Because it's not making having 15 people or 5 people or whatever talking to you about things you need to be doing in your marriage when they're only ever talking to you. They don't see the other person or get any of that. It's all biased information. And honestly, like if you don't know better, you don't even deserve the marriage. Like, I was, we were talking, me and my husband were talking one day. We are like, a new relationship or a marriage is like a new house. Yeah, for the first few years or whatever, probably very little damage is gonna happen. It settles, there's cracks here and things like that, but you fix those and everything. But if you don't tend to those, well, things start to break,
yeah.
right? And you still don't tend to those. Windows smash. Now everything that was outside can come inside.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's way harder to get it back out. You can't treat this is why it's like when people say when they run their relationships, marriages, and that, like they're just effortless, like they just go, they're on autopilot. Autopilot isn't a win.
Oh, it's a guaranteed lose. Guaranteed
It's
lose, in my opinion.
you're losing time, efforts, everything.
Everything.
It's like for what I think people are so comfortable giving up on themselves that when they get married or they have that partner, they're like, then it's cool if I give up on you too because we're in this together. So it's like they get comfortable on giving up rather than trying because you're tied to someone else.
Yeah, you're supposed to be a partnership, not two individuals.
I don't want to drag dead fucking weight around with me.
Exactly. But it's an interesting point that you just made, and let's explore it a little bit because when you ask men what they want, somewhere in the top five, depends on the guy, will be keeping things private. And that may mean anything he says to her, the relationship, all that stuff. That is inevitably somewhere in the top five. For some guys, it's number one, right? And one of the things that I have found over the years on social media, there are guys out there that will broadcast their marital issues. There are, but they are few and far between, right? The women, oh dear, I have an entire channel based on that, right? Responding to them because they will go on, and it makes me want to cry. It doesn't make me angry. It makes me sad to see it. Where they'll go on and post something about their husband. They may even make a video mocking him. You've seen how many, the Roman, ask them about the Roman thing or the orange thing. When that, I don't know if you remember that, will you peel an orange for me? And all these women are out there. Will you go peel an orange? Will you go get me an orange? And then posting online, humiliating him. And I sat there and I said to so many of those, do you realize what you've just done to your man? He's done with you. You've lost his respect. You've lost his trust more than anything else. and you will never get it back. Because once a man loses trust, the odds of him getting it back are very, very slim. And it doesn't
Well,
matter if
especially
you're
without intervention. Yeah.
something like that, right? And
Yeah.
but yet there are women out there, and a lot of them, and some of them have huge channels where they mock their husbands. Oh, my
Hmm.
husband's really happy, and I'm like, bullshit. Let me talk to him.
Hmm.
But it seems I'm being, I'm pigeonholing here, but it seems to be far more prevalent with the women. And my question to you is, why do women think this is a good thing in general? I understand you wouldn't do that, but why do they? Are they looking? My argument that I've always thrown out is they're looking for validation. They're looking for the dopamine hit of a bunch of likes and comments. Because if once somebody posts that video up, they'll have literally, in some cases, millions of comments from other women.
A lot of it's rage bait.
Rage bait, group thinking comes in. I get all that, but as a woman, and I've asked Lindsay the same question: what's the benefit? How is it in a woman's mind? And I get that I'm pigeonholing, right? That it makes sense to trash your husband on video on the internet for clicks and likes. Where Explain that logic to me, please, because I'll tell you right now, every guy listening right now is going, "Yeah, explain that one to me."
Oh, I think that's bad character on their part. Like, I don't like. It was funny when my husband and I met and we started dating and we talked about marriage and that. He goes, "I can withstand a lot of things, but being emasculated is never going to be one of those.
Exactly.
That is automatic divorce, and that is my only hard boundary."
And by the way, same with my wife. That was exactly what I said.
Yeah. So when I see things like that, and I'm like, either the dude's involved and he's like, okay, whatever, we're going to get money for this anyway with the big accounts. But it's like, it's it's because as a society we've okayed it in the same way at the beginning when we started talking how men can just openly discuss how I'm not getting laid ever, I have a dead bedroom, and they're all over the internet talking about how their wife doesn't put out, how
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, right? And it's just more socially acceptable for them to talk about a dead bedroom because it's getting lucky, it's always been the way it is. And I feel like that's kind of the way that that trend has moved for women, which is they'll openly talk about the man flu or their careers, things like that, as if it's teasing, where it's like, yeah, but it's I get for a few it might be teasing, but for a large majority it's not. You're poking holes
Yeah.
not just in your marital boat anymore, but in who they are. You're telling them, you're making fun of them,
Mm-hmm.
you're telling the world they're stupid or dumb, daft, whatever, and you're doing it like you're letting everyone in
Well, I
to
mean, to
have a
that.
say in this, to have some sort of input. And that alone, that's not just going to damage your marriage, that's damaging to your partner. And I don't
Yeah.
really give a shit about the whole, well, have a thicker skin. Get freaking bent.
Well, that's where, like, I remember having a conversation a few months back with a woman who was adamantly defending her doing it. She put her husband out there, blasted him. And she used the words you did. I was just teasing. It's all in good fun. He doesn't care. And I'm like, oh, he cares, honey. Right? She actually got back to me a few weeks later and she goes, "You were right." Because one of his coworkers saw it and then started making fun of him.
Yep.
And he was humiliated.
Hmm.
And she goes, "I never thought that would happen." And, you know, a lot of times I don't defend guys. They need to speak up and say, "No, we're not going to allow this. You're not take that video down now." Right? The agreement I have with my wife, for example, because I make videos, I have never once, and I never will, talked about us or our relationship other than in a positive manner on
Right.
anything. And
Right.
I have never once violated that, and I never will because I respect her too much. I honor her too much to do that. But the thing that I don't think women get is, I think some cases they genuinely are just trying to have fun and tease, right? But that's not how men view it. Men, and they'll say to me, "Well, men tease each other all the time." Yes, we do. but that's different. It is different to guys, right? Like, if I'm working out at the gym with my buds and, we're picking on each other, that is totally different than, because it's most of the time it's face to face, versus going on the internet and posting that he wouldn't peel an orange for me, so he's a shitty husband or boyfriend or
Mhm.
whatever. The amount of humiliation that that creates for a man. Because even if no one says it to him or calls him and says, gee, your wife said this, he's always going to wonder, will someone do it?
Well, and I think also it's like, you're not fooling me. It's not teasing, it's shaming. Trying to pass it off as teasing is it's low
Justifying
it's
it.
just it's low class because it's like now if they come to you and say, "Hey, that hurt my feelings," like I don't want that up. Are they going to be ridiculed?
Exactly. Right. And who knows what's going to happen? If because I wonder in some of these cases where most of the guys probably don't say anything because they don't want to rock the boat. And I'm not defending them. That's a mistake. All right. But I think a lot of them, because there's one creator, I call her my counterpart, right? She does the exact opposite of me from the, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. She does similar things that I do, but from the female side. I have no problem with that. That's great. I think it's awesome. I wish we could have a dialogue. I've invited her to come on the podcast. She won't, right?
Why not?
Because she knows I'm going to call her out. She doesn't want that.
Oh,
But she inevitably says, my husband's good with all this. And I'm like, there is no way in hell that man is good with what you're doing. No way. Because the one difference between us is that I will never put my wife on blast. She puts her
right.
husband on blast literally every week. And I'm like, again, I don't understand the mindset behind that. And there are men that do it, to be fair. But there's no way your relationship survives that. You may stay together, but you ain't gonna be happy.
Oh, I say that I go, if your only goal is till death do us part, there you go. All you need is stubbornness and away you go. Does that mean your marriage was successful?
Oh
Absolutely
God, no!
not.
It's the exact opposite. It's torture.
But with people going through that, it's like it's one of those things. I think that might for many people fall under that domestic abuse in the sense that you're either going to put up with it and tolerate it or you can buck off and you take nothing.
Right. And then the other argument they'll throw out is, and I'm sure you kind of think you touched on it too. Well, I'm making. I mean, I know one creator. She's making 50 grand a month that way. Because the thing is, to be fair to those creators, some of them, they're making bank off of it, right? Trashing men makes money. It's why every marketer out there,
I
card,
just don't see the benefit
but
overall.
it
Like even with
exactly.
money,
If you
even
value
with
money
money, it's
over,
like
yeah,
I don't I never want to be viewed as somebody that's like, she hates men or, screw marriages or anything like that. It's like, what's the point of making an entire group of people feel like they're less than?
exactly.
What's
Yeah,
what's the point of that? And like in the same in a marriage, what is the point of bringing your partner to their knees and making them beg for everything and making them feel less than? If you need to step on your partner to elevate yourself, if you need to have control over that, that's all therapy. Like
but do you?
your
But does therapy even going to work in that case? I would argue no. I mean,
therapy works for the person who wants to work it.
that's a fair
But
point.
but my thing is this, I think a lot of people will not go to the table because with going to the table and open communication, which is why they get lost in the bullshit stuff of just name calling before they can sort anything, is because if let's say we're in a dead bedroom, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you just want answers. Like, Natalie, why? What happened? Now, I don't have anything medical. I just don't want to. But what happened? And now I don't want to be accountable for that because nothing happened, but I still don't want to do it. But I don't want to tell you that because if I tell you that I'm just giving up, then I have to fucking change. And I don't want to do that because I'm really comfortable right now. So if I can do everything possible to avoid that conversation, I don't have to change. And everything just clips along. Every now and then it's uncomfortable or whatever, but who cares? I'm going to get everything I want. And I can keep it that way as long as I don't ever have to be accountable for my own behaviors or any of that stuff. And the only way that I can do that is to not have any conversations around it. And the only way I can stop that is to just barrel into the bullshit right away. That's all you want. It's so, you're
Oh,
gross.
that
All you think
that
about
I
is
was
sex.
just going to mention
Done
that
all this.
phrase, right? The classic phrase that guys hear all the time when they try and talk about this stuff is that all you think about?
You know
Is
what?
that
It
and
is. It
and
is. Because
and to be
it
fair,
is.
it
You know
does
why?
become that. Yes.
Because you're one of two people in the marriage and you're holding it all. If I stood in front of the fridge and didn't let you the fuck in, would you be complaining
Yeah,
about food a
exactly.
lot?
Yeah.
We didn't agree to sexlessness. You haven't even disclosed why that's happening. There's nothing on my part that's saying how I'm going to get through this, how I'm supposed to get through this. You haven't even come to check on my mental health and how I'm doing with everything. At what point am I going to matter in the freaking marriage?
And that's to the guys listening right now, you need to do exactly what she just said, right? I get it. You might get blowback. You may pay the price, as we often say as men, right? I'd rather pay that price than live in hell, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
the comment it was funny when you said, is that all you think about, basically? Because that's the thing I hear from guys all the time. I tried to talk to her, and it's one of two things. She will not talk about it. Like, flat out, I'm not going to talk about it. Like, literally say that. Or is that all you think about? To try and shut it down. And I say
It
to
should.
guys, you've got to be persistent at that point. Which, to be fair, the guys need to be responsible for that, and they're not. They don't want to rock the boat, but it's something that happens all the
We've done
time.
that.
Yeah,
We've done that. We have also, as a society, strapped shame to sex and don't talk about it.
exactly.
We'll flood into everyone else's feed and tell them, oh, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. It's like, what do you give a shit?
Yeah, who cares what anybody else thinks? That's just another thing I often
Right?
say to guys is, why do you care? Like, same, we were talking about the divorce thing, either the stigma of it, and I'm like, why do you care?
Yeah.
Who gives? I don't give two fucks what I've been divorced twice. One was horrific. One was easy as pie. Right? I have no shame over them. None. Nor should I. Because, I get people, women especially, love, because they love, one, they attack me because I'm bald. Oh my God, But they'll also say, well, you've been divorced twice. Yeah, and so what? And they get enraged that it doesn't bother me. And that's what I say to guys is, look, whatever the situation is, you gotta be your own advocate. You gotta stand up for yourself. If she's trying to shut you down, you've got to be persistent. That doesn't mean you get angry, because that's not going to help. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I've even said to guys, write her a letter.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
if she give that's my response to the I don't want to talk about it ever. Write her a letter. Leave it on the pillow or wherever that she's going to find it, and let her read it. And be honest with her. Don't be nasty. Tell her how you feel, which is a struggle for guys, right? They don't want to share their feelings. But if you can't do that as a man, you're not willing to fix the relationship. Eh, That's my opinion.
Well, yes and no. The reason I
Okay.
say yes and no is because a lot of people are afraid to say anything because they hit below the belt. So that's all gonna be used as emotional bullets later if they're vulnerable now.
It's a fair point, but
So
my argument to the men that say that is, would you rather take those bullets then and maybe fix it, or live in misery again? Right?
right, but remember, some of those people have online accounts, and that's what they push.
Oh, absolutely. And lawyers will use it too, by the way.
I'm a bit of a like, and I get that I speak from a place of like we have post nuptials and everything, like whatever. I know that as a woman, I speak from a different place in that, but for me, it's like if you're not going to talk about this with me and it impacts me and affects me, then you're going to talk about it with the judge because we're fucking done. As soon as
Yeah,
we're in a marriage and we can't speak openly and honestly, we can't talk and communicate, there's literally nowhere else for us to go.
exactly. And
We're
that
going to wrap this up. Yeah, where everything reaches completion. And in that sometimes is marriage. But what we're not going to do is waste my entire existence because you can't be bothered.
you only got one life. That's
Yeah.
it. There's one time on this earth. And that's why I say to guys, look, I hear everything you're saying. Think of it as, it's fourth and 20. You gotta throw that Hail Mary with no time left. You've gotta throw the Hail Mary. Or decide you're either gonna live with it or die with it. Because that's what's gonna
Well,
happen. And to be fair, I understand where the guys are coming from, but some of them have done it and it's worked. Others have done it and it's blown back at them. And I say to them, okay, what's the blowback? Well, she posted it or told all her friends about it. She was doing that anyway. I hate to tell you, dude.
I think that's just a shitty freaking partner. Honestly, if you're
Exactly.
sharing
Yes.
shit, if you don't know how to be in a relationship on your own, don't fucking be in one. And if you need help in your relationship, you go to an unbiased party.
Yes. Exactly.
Like,
Well, trying to find one
this
though
is
can be
just,
tough, but
I don't think people understand or appreciate the partnership marriage can have. Like, I just don't, you watch them treat each other like siblings, and it's like, what the happened?
yeah, it's like two
What
children.
happened?
Yeah, it's like two
Yeah.
two young, like you said, siblings or children trying to communicate and they can't do it, and then it's just a nightmare. It just is.
You know, with the whole going to, like, one thing I say is that, when I have people at my table is, when one cuts off sex, I'm like, okay, cool. So it's now open. And they're like, well, wait a minute. Okay, I'm waiting. You just single handedly changed the entire dynamic of the sexual relationship that you both agreed to without any kind of conversation or consent. So what stops them from doing the exact same?
Let's explore this because it was, we're running out of time, but we'll take a few extra minutes and kind of talk about this because one of the things that guys have talked with me about, and I know they talk about it in general, is if you're in that sexless relationship, dead bedroom, whatever term you want to use, there are guys out there will say, well, if you ain't getting any, it justifies cheating. There are others that will say, well, then it should be an open marriage, polygamy. There's different things that, what's the other? Polyamory? Is that another one?
Yeah.
And again, my viewpoint, good, bad, or indifferent, is if you've reached that point, just get out and go find somebody else, right? But that's me. There are others that probably think that is a solution. What do you put out there? Like, it is cheating a solution? I don't know if that's a great way to put it. Same thing, is open marriage a good idea? Because I don't see it, but that's me and good,
Right.
bad, or different, right? What are your thoughts on all that?
So I think cheating is cheating. Whether you cheat your partner out of agreed to monogamy or cheat on your partner, cheating is cheating. I'm not splitting hairs. I'm not trying to find a different moral ground. You agreed to something and then you changed it without a conversation or consent. Another thing I've also realized after talking to people extensively who have been cheated on, as well as those who have been forced into celibacy, is the impact is relatively the same. Mental health, physical,
Mm,
not really sure about life, a lot of hurt, depression, rejection, feeling not good enough. It's like basically the symptom, it's all the same. It's the same.
that's a good point.
If some people will say, well, if you don't like it, you should leave before you cheat if you don't
That's
like it.
that would
And
be
my
me. Yeah,
and this is my argument. You should have fucking left before you pulled all the sex too, but you didn't.
fair.
And once you remove respect, you don't get to decide how somebody else responds. That's not the way it works. For
Interesting.
many
Okay.
people, when you pulled sex, when you no longer gave up any type of care to your partner, when it was not a conversation but forced, that was the breach. That
Mm,
broke the marriage, not the infidelity on the other side. That cheating your partner out of what was agreed
yeah,
to,
yeah.
breached the marriage. And people want to overstep that and be like, well, if you don't like it, you shouldn't cheat, you should leave. Right. And if you didn't like your marriage, you should have left, rather than trying to control it all
Yep. I see where
and
exactly
then
where we're going with it.
sweep it
Yep.
under the rug and drag your partner along. We're not going to be split. We're not going to be finding different moral grounds here because both suck. But if you want to go with the you should leave before you cheat, I agree. Before you cheat your partner out of agreed to monogamy, you should leave.
Yeah, it should go both ways, right? So,
Absolutely, it should.
yeah,
But we have this thing about sex.
well, I like my first marriage. There was a lot of problems with it, but she was cheating on me, right? And I ultimately found out, and we tried to work through it. And it, long story short, she didn't give up her cheating, and I know how it made me feel, and ultimately she left me for him, and been married to him for 30 years now. And that's all well and good. Good for her. I don't care.
Yeah.
But people have said to me, "Don't why don't you hate her for it?" Because one, there's no benefit to me, but it kind of goes into what you were just talking about, right? Is the cheating didn't end the marriage. It was all the stuff that was going beforehand, right? If I was in her shoes, what she should have done is said, before I cheat, I'm going to leave him, right?
Hmm.
And that's where I hold her responsible. And that's my viewpoint.
Yeah.
I don't advocate for cheating at all. And it probably because I was cheated on. But my argument is, to your point, exactly that is if you are at the point where you think you're going to cheat, you need to walk away. That's your
100%.
responsibility.
Even
100% your responsibility.
and I say this, even if they've been withholding sex, even if it's all like that,
Doesn't justify it.
you are still a representation of your behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Those are in your control. Them withholding sex are not in your control. You going out and finding an additional lover, that is. That's where you need to decide, are you going to let go of the marriage with your character or just the marriage? Because it's not mandatory you burn it to the ground. That's not mandatory. You're allowed to leave with your character intact.
Yep.
Even if it's because I'm forced into celibacy. I don't want to be forced into celibacy.
No, that's a legitimate reason to leave. If you've been forced into celibacy, you're absolutely justified in leaving. There's no ifs, ands, or
100%.
buts. No,
Yep.
it's not even up for debate. But there, I mean, I get the religious aspect of it. I'm non-religious completely, but I want to kind of touch on the other thing that's out there because guys throw it out there, which is, well, talk to her about having an open marriage or all the variation terms for that. And again, I wouldn't do it. It's not something I would do. But I would never judge someone that decided to do that.
Well, I
Does,
appreciate you for that.
no, I just don't. Here's my viewpoint, Natalie, on any of this stuff. And guys get pissed at me, some of them, the more conservative ones. What two people choose to do in a bedroom that they consent to is entirely their business.
Yep.
I don't care if you're gay, it doesn't matter to me. My hard and fast rules are no kids, no animals, that type of stuff, right?
Right.
That's crossing a line. But if you decide as a husband and wife that you're going to have an open marriage and you're okay with it, whereas it's not a forced thing, you both agree to it, who am I to judge that, right? But I also know of instances where they've tried that, and it doesn't work well for the guys because the women have no problem finding somebody else, right? Whereas the guys struggle. That's what they tell me. I've never been in that, so I don't know. I could be dead wrong. I'm going by what they're telling me. But is it a legitimate, if you've tried everything else, is it a legitimate solution? And give me the pros and cons of it. Because you would know better than anyone, right?
Well, my marriage has been open for over 12 years now.
Yep.
We've been together 20, coming up on 19 years of marriage in February. But we're not monogamous. And we knew that before we were ever even engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Before we were ever even engaged, I said, I can be married and committed to you forever, but I don't know if I can be monogamous. And he was like, that's okay. He goes, I'm sure a lot of people feel like that, but are too afraid to say it. 8 years into our marriage, we opened the marriage. I actually just found out last year he'd actually never been in a monogamous relationship. Now, when people ask me about it, my question is always, are you monogamous? Because if you're monogamous, if that's how you like your relationships and that, you're gonna start acting on feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna fall in love maybe, and it's like, well, I can have the whole package here. And then people leave the home, right? And they partner up with somebody else. In those things, then that's why I do videos on, are you willing to negotiate away your monogamy? Because
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
strictly monogamous, opening your marriage does not make sense. Just go and just dissolve it.
That's where you got to get divorced.
Just dissolve it.
Right.
Because, or like when people are like jealous and they come and talk to them, like, what are you doing? How are you going to make it through an open freaking marriage when you're not even allowed to talk to the opposite sex?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
That's a
So,
good point.
like,
Yeah.
but if the bedroom is dead, one person is like, I am not having sex again, but we still want to have, but we have everything else, just not that. A lot of times, the other person, if it's male specifically, they'll go to like, they might have an escort or like a massage parlor or whatever,
Hmm.
where it's like, don't ask, don't tell. I know something's happening, but we still have a lot of intimacy. We still have our whole life. And I'm not really worried about that at all, as long as there's no relationship.
Hmm.
What makes me laugh is when people have these rules in there, is when they're going to try this all out and they're like, hey, you're not allowed to catch feelings. And I'm like, I didn't know that you were capable of just doing shit like that.
Well,
Like,
that's the argument against it I hear all the time is one or the other will catch feelings, and I'm like, if that's the case, why'd you do it in the first place, right? It doesn't make sense to me, I guess is what I'm saying.
and that's okay because you're monogamous.
Yeah, I am.
So,
I am.
and to me, like, it's like, I date somebody as well,
Hmm.
and I love him. It doesn't make me love my husband less. It's not pie. I love them both. But my commitment lies with my husband in my home. So even though I have these strong feelings, I don't act on them. Their feelings flow like water. It's the commitment, the anchor to my marital boat that I honor, that I have. But feelings just flow like water. It's like whatever, they're going to
Hmm.
change
Hmm.
constantly anyway. And just because I have feelings doesn't mean I have to act on them. I can just enjoy them.
Well, it's interesting because I'm thinking of my situation now, if I may, and
Mhm.
this will be fun. So, and I've put it out there many times. I'm very happily married. My wife is awesome. We're completely monogamous. My best friend in the world is not my wife.
Right.
It is another woman who I've been friends with for decades. Her and I are absolutely in tune with one another. I can say anything to her. It's the best relationship you could ever have. There is zero chemistry physically between us. We have never had a relationship that way. We never will. But I have so many people say to me, you're having an emotional affair. And I don't disagree, but my wife fully knows about it. So, in a matter of speaking, I guess I'm having an open relationship, right? On that level, there's just no physical part of it and never will be. Is that kind of what you would put it as too? Is that what I'm going through? Is that in fact an open marriage, so to speak?
Only if your wife thinks so.
She has no problem with it because she knows there's no
Then there's
threat
no
to her.
problem.
There is absolutely no threat to her whatsoever, and that's not just me saying it. She knows that.
So does she view her as a really good friend of yours, like really close family friend?
Yes.
Then it's not an open
To the
marriage.
to the
Because
point, Natalie, she said to her so many times, "Why don't you come visit?"
yeah, like that's to me is not an open marriage. And because there are boundaries in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you went and like, as long as you're not relying on her for emotional intimacy and things like that, like if you're leaning on her as a friend the way that you would any friend or a close friend, there's nothing wrong with there. That's whatever. Even if I think it only becomes like that, like open, if they're giving you something that your wife won't, can't, or anything like that. But it's a level of intimacy
Mm-hmm.
that is shared when you're more than friends.
What do you mean by that? Because so in my example, for example, her name, I'll call her Kay. All right, it starts
Okay.
with a K. All right. When she was going through a divorce a few years back, I mean, we were constantly in contact about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was helping her through. And I love her. I make no bones about it. I love her. She loves me. My wife knows everything. My wife has said, "Go visit her," and at that
Yeah.
time, she's like, "Go be with her,"
Yeah.
because there's no threat to my wife, right? But again, I'm trying to, because this is great that we went there. I had no intention of doing this, but it works out. Again, it kind of, because it goes to what a lot of guys deal with, right? Is she gives me some things that my wife doesn't, right? There are some things that I can talk with Kay about more than I can talk with my wife about. Not our relationship, though, right? Just in general type
Oh.
stuff.
Oh,
Or
okay. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't talk with her about my and my wife's relationship other than general stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to vent because we had a fight or something like that's one thing. But I remember when she was going through her divorce, she was really struggling because trying to come to grips with it because they just divorced because they just weren't compatible. He's a great guy. She loved him, but they just were completely incompatible. And I made a mistake. It's my fault. She took all the responsibility for it, which again, so having those conversations, I've had people say to me, "You crossed the line," and I'm like, I don't think I did because one, I didn't share with my wife everything, but I absolutely shared with her that I talked with Kay today. Right? There are certain things between Kay and I that are private to her. I would be disrespecting her to share everything, right? But I will say to my wife, we talked today. She's struggling with some stuff, and it was all perfectly good. But that's kind of where it fulfills a need for me. This is so funny we weren't here. It fulfills a need for me for a type of intimacy, if you will. It's not physical, but it gives me that comfort that I have that person on my side that I know will never leave my side. That, as I put it, she's my foxhole person, right? If push comes to shove and I am absolutely at the end of my rope, she's the one that I know will sit there and call me out. See, my wife won't call me out on some things. That's the
See,
difference.
like when I look at my computer and they do that thing like who's going to erase your history when you
That would be
die?
Kay.
That and for me it's my husband.
Yeah. Well, my wife wouldn't know
So
how to.
right. But my question I guess is this is that if you in those instances where you would choose K,
hmm
like how does your wife feel about that?
She knows all about it. She has never said a negative thing. She's good with it. That's what she tells me. And I have
So
no reason to doubt it because she knows it's not about her. It's my I have had trauma in my past. My wife knows all about it, right? I have shared, I was AR'd at 13 by a 35-year-old woman. I was in an abusive childhood with my mother and all that. And Kay is that person that allows me to have that anchor, if you will. By the way, the reason my marriage is so good now is because of Kay. Because I have that friend that I know has my back no matter what, and it gives me stability, if I guess is the word I'll use.
how come that's not your wife though?
I would say at this instance it's time. That pre-existed my current relationship because I know I would never. There's no way in hell I would be married to Kay. No,
Would you
no way.
have you ever thought of like changing your foxhole person, like making
Oh,
the adjustment?
absolutely.
Like, it's one thing to be there for Kay, but it's another thing to allow your wife to step into that position
I would
for
have no
Kay.
problem with that. In a matter of speaking, I'd like them to be co-partners in that, like we just talked about, right? An
As you're
open,
building a harem.
yeah, yeah. In a manner of speaking, right? Because again, it gives me that sounding board, that rock. I can say anything to her, and what she will do that my wife won't do is call me out on it brutally. Like
but
she knows that not that she would intend to hurt my feelings, don't take it that way, but she knows that if I need to hear something, she will say it. My wife won't do that because she doesn't want to hurt me. There's that separation where I don't know how to put it. My wife loves me the way she loves me, right? Kay loves me differently and is more, I don't know how to put it, more willing to risk that than my wife is, maybe. That would be the better way to put it.
well, she can press different boundaries, which is
She'll cross them
also
at times.
right. But when you say, I've been told I've crossed a line, who said you crossed a line?
Kay would. In the sense that, like, if I were to say to her, something, let's say I got into a fight with my wife and started talking with her about it, Kay will put a boundary up going, all right, we'll talk about it to this point. But if I'm like really venting, you need to go talk to her about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she gives me. And that centering is worth the world to me. Because I would prefer, now look, some may have said, well, why can't you find a guy friend that would be like that? I will. I am that guy friend to other guys. Like, dude, shut the fuck up. You're wrong here. You need to go do this with her. Blah, blah, blah. Talk to her or whatever. That's what I have. Whereas with my wife, she loves me too much to hurt me, is the way I will put it. And go ahead. I
It's
love
like,
that. We really went off down the rabbit hole. We
well,
had no intention of doing this.
it's kind of like you really want to fall into that helpful and hurtful. If it's
Yeah.
helpful, it has to be said. If it's hurtful, probably shut the fuck up. But your wife, like, not everything is going to hurt you. And the things that hurt you don't, it's not because they're being said, it's because you're listening to them and they're impacting you in the way that they should because
Mm.
you have to have accountability or something, it's being flushed out. Whereas Kay will just say whatever, and if it might be helpful, but she says it in a hurtful way, and you're like, well, that's something I can appreciate. Whereas, like, perhaps for your wife, she just needs to understand that, like, she's not responsible for your feelings, and that with tact, you can deliver all information, regardless, because you just have to show up for the other person in the sense that it's like, I'm going to take care of my feelings, but I'm going to respect yours.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good way to put it. But we went down the rabbit hole. Let me pull us back out. That where I was going with all that, my mindset with it is, when you're in an open marriage, let's say, that would be the fear that I would have. Like, I know, and my wife knows, and Kay knows, there's never going to be that physical thing. But with an open marriage, by definition, I think you're introducing the physical, which would take it to another level. And that's where, to me, I could never do that. That's just not who I am. But I don't judge people that can. But when I hear guys say that to me, well, we'll do an open marriage, or I've heard women say it, and I'm like, if there's physicality, to me, that's adding a whole other level. And I don't. I guess what I want to ask you is, to me, that seems like a big risk. Is it, or is it just my assumptions?
Well, I think if you're not if you are monogamous, I think it's a big risk. I think it's a big
Okay.
risk when you open your marriage as it's kind of like having kids to fix it. No, 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 no. You don't add people to fix your marriage unless it's a
Exactly. That's exactly my
therapist or
point.
whatever,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So, but here's the thing: is that there's so many people that are faced with these marriages that are like 40 years old or whatever. They have a whole life built together and everything, and one partner is just done having sex. The other person doesn't want to give it all up. They're totally fine having the other partner, but they don't want to give up the marriage, and they're just, you got it. It's kind of like a lot of partners like weigh it out. Like, if we don't do this, is it going to dissolve anyway? Because my mental health isn't going to withstand it. Or we try this, and there's a good chance it could dissolve well, because
Well,
we're
yeah.
monogamous, trying to not be
Right.
monogamous.
Right.
And I think a lot of people try to use it as like well, this will work, and then we can keep everything intact. Where it's like, well, that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's why I see so many of the don't ask, don't tell, because if they're not talking about it, if they pretend it doesn't exist, then it's like that ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it exists and they talk about it, well, then they're going to start talking about all their insecurities around it. Like, what if you leave? What if this happens? What if that? And then slowly it just becomes that because you're starting to buy into it's broken. Like, a lot of people believe an open marriage is a broken marriage. Okay, well, I hate to tell you this, but just because two people are still married it does not mean shit's working out.
Right. It's I kind of sort of would probably fall into that, but I also see your point. Right. Is if you've reached that point, the marriage was broken anyway. So if you're a
Mhm.
monogamous person, right?
Like, when Dan and I opened our marriage, it wasn't because anything was broken. It wasn't because we were fighting. None of that stuff happened. I was really struggling with my identity and things, but we always knew it could go this way.
Mm-hmm.
But for me in the initial part is I was so struggling with who I was and what I was going to do with my life and what I really wanted and those things. And I had to do a lot of work on myself to get to even where I am.
Right.
But I feel like when people go to that immediately and they've never had that or anything, I'm like, I feel like this is trying to be a quick fix, which is actually just going to make it either implode or explode.
Right. It's kind of like having a children, right? You mentioned we'll fix the marriage by
Yeah.
having a child. That if your marriage isn't strong to begin with, this is my perception, you have no business going there unless you're trying to do it as a home run Hail Mary. If it's a dead bedroom and everything else is great, but this one thing, that might be a solution. That's my viewpoint
Well,
on it.
it might see, and the reason why with dead bedroom and not dormant is because, I hear this a lot. Well, I don't want, open marriage is gross, like STDs, yada yada. I'm like, oh my God, it's almost like there isn't an entire industry around protecting each other from
Yeah,
sex.
yeah, really.
Right? Like, but not to mention this when, and they sit at the table and they're like, well, no, because, what if they bring something home? I'm always, what do you give a shit? You're not having sex with them anyway. You don't even sleep in the same bed.
That's a good point. I hadn't
What do
really
you
thought of that one.
care? You
Yeah.
don't care. You don't care. You care about control. Those are
Right.
different.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
when it's dead, and the family's built and the kids are moved away and everything like that, I think a lot of times it does work. And I think it works. I think it happens anyway. I think there's a lot of people that have long-term affairs. The partner knows, doesn't want to say anything, doesn't want to change their reality, so they just float along.
Well, I will tell you, I have a very good friend who happens to be gay and is married, and he says in the gay community, he said it, not me, so don't come for me. He said one of the reasons the gay divorce rate is so far is that they're almost always open relationships. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm taking his word for it. But he said there's no worry about you're going to be left. It's just what they do. Again, don't come for me, people. That's him saying it.
Right. Well, I think, okay, so when it comes to open marriage,
Mm-hmm.
I was reading the stats. So on traditional marriage, divorce rate is 50 to 60%. Open marriage, it's 92%. And people are like, see, that's a loss. And I was like, back up. If 40 to 50% of traditional marriages are still intact, I would bet less than 10% are happy based on my own experiences and
I
interactions.
would agree. If that, yeah.
The 92% is high, but I think the reason that it's high is because people who are open enough to say it in their marriage aren't going to drag each other along for fucking generations just to have a house cat.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, it might be higher than that. My divorce rate might be higher than somebody in a traditional, but that has absolutely zero to
Right.
do with happiness.
Right. You're looking at the hard number, not the data that created that
And
number. Yeah.
it's funny that people will like say these numbers to me and I go, "Oh my God, it's almost like you don't have a say in the numbers. Like you're actually part of the freaking numbers.
I
You have a
know.
say in your own relationship and whether or not you're a statistic or not." But if the only thing you're trying to do in your marriage is make it till death do us part and nothing else,
Yeah,
you get what you pay
that's not
for.
a reason to stay together at that point. So, Natalie, we went way over, and that's okay. This has been a fantastic conversation. Um, we're gonna wrap things up, but I want to make sure that people understand that they can go follow you. And we haven't even talked about your book. I'm so sorry. I want to mention that. So let me give you a few moments to talk about your book, plug it, and how people can get it. So go ahead.
All right. So I wrote my memoir called Crazy on the Inside, a memoir of nobody special. And it discusses how me and my husband opened our marriage. And I started living a part time single life for 1 week a month in New York City. You can get that on Amazon, even just using my name. I am a relationship and marriage counselor. And I have a website, which I'm sure he'll post. It's called The
Yep.
Marriage Philosopher. And I'm currently working on my second book to help people understand the significance and importance of also maintaining some individuality within your marriage or relationships. This is my passion, and I'm hoping to bring a lot of people back to the marital table, take them off autopilot, and get them back in the game.
And I'll put links down below in the show notes to all this stuff. So you don't have to go looking for
Awesome.
it. Just go down to the
Thank you.
bottom and click on it and get to it. And you also, in my opinion, have one of the best TikTok channels out there. How
Awesome. Thank you.
for what, about a year now, give or take, I think I've watched every video you've put out there. I may not have hearted all of them,
Yeah.
but I have watched, I think, every one of them. How can people follow you on the various social medias? I'm sure you're on more than just TikTok, right?
Yeah. I have like a YouTube channel. It's just my name, typically. It's just my name. I've scoured everything and I've just picked up all of it. Like on my TikTok, it's open and married. On my Facebook, It is my name, Natalie Warner. My TikTok is under my name as well, or sorry, my YouTube channel is under my name as well. That's about all I have for those. And then you're going to drop the website to my
Absolutely.
hosting.
I'll put links to all the social medias too. So I make it as easy as I can for people to find you. So Natalie, as we wrap things up, I want to give you a few moments. Any final thoughts on anything we discussed or just in general?
Learn to communicate for yourself. Just it will make your life easier and it'll make all the relationships around you much easier. Learning to communicate means we're taking away confusion and adding clarity. We're adding boundaries and we're getting an equal voice and say in our relationships and marriages. And that is absolutely paramount to having a healthy relationship and future. Learn to communicate for yourself as well as for the people around you. But also remember, if you have children, they look to you and model how you communicate with the people around you in your relationship. If you're a model for those people, it's really important that you know how to communicate because they're watching and they're learning and they are going to mimic it.
It's something I say myself. It's the number one thing in any relationship, and that includes non-romantic ones. I've said it. I think I
Yeah.
said it earlier in the show. If you can't communicate with another person, whatever that friendship, whatever you want to call it, that relationship doesn't exist because it is the cornerstone of all of it.
On my YouTube channel, I have longer videos on like on my book and how I open my marriage and that. But there's also one on there where I give a full thing on like why it's really important to learn to communicate and all the benefits of that. And like I've done a chart, like an actual like graph and things like that, because when you can show people why and how it works, it's much easier to buy into and to realize like, yeah, it's fun and everything when I melt down or whatever, but I actually need to learn to get my point across and be somebody worth listening to.
Great way to put it. All right, Natalie, thank you so much for your time. This
Thanks
has
for
been
having me.
freaking awesome. We even went down a rabbit hole I had no intention of. All right, let me go ahead and wrap things up, guys. What an awesome show! When I do set these things up, I have certain expectations. This one blew my expectations away. So much valuable information in here. So take a moment if you've enjoyed this. Do me that favor, give me that thumbs up, give me that like, give me the heart, all you know the drill on that. And share this if you know someone, doesn't matter if they're a guy or a woman, that's struggling or maybe could benefit from this. Make sure you share it so that they can benefit from the information. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos pretty much every single day on various topics, including the ones we've talked about today. And the podcast comes out pretty much every Sunday at 11. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up on that note, and we'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.